Hi, everyone, and happy Friday. Welcome to today's webinar slash workshop. We're going to be talking about supporting parents in the workplace today. And I think this is a topic that is not talked about enough. And we could all do a better job at supporting parents in the workplace. I myself have three little ones, and I feel pretty lucky that I was at an employer that did support well enough, but we were also a small employer, so there's only so much one can do in that situation. But we have three really amazing powerhouse women panelists here today to help talk about this topic, and they all come from a slightly different perspective and a different angle, and in what they're doing today, and the things that they're doing in their work, but also the experiences that they've had in the past regarding this topic. So excited to dive in, but before we do, just wanted to welcome everyone that's here. As you're getting settled, if you're able to turn your camera off, amazing. I think we'll have a more intimate group today, so hopefully we can have a really interactive discussion, and people can either raise their hand, come off camera, or come off mute and chime in with questions, or put them in the chat. We should have some time to address any questions. And we will be sending out the recording and our panelists' LinkedIn profiles afterwards, so you can connect with them. And also feel free to put in the chat your name, maybe where you're calling from, and then your LinkedIn profile as well. So welcome again. So just a quick introduction. My name is Krista. I'm one of the co-founders of Talent Collective, and we are a women-run community for women in the recruiting and TA space. So we bring a lot of these different topics of just recruiting topics or the entire employee life cycle. But we also like to promote women's issues and women's topics. I know this is about parents, but I think women can be a little bit more affected, just given that they are a big part of bringing a new child into life. So another huge thank you to our panelists. We have Ariana, Steph, and Megan here today. I'm actually going to pass it over to them to do introductions. So if each of you could tell us a little bit about yourselves and the work you're doing today, and anything else you'd like to share, that'd be great. And we can go in that order just to keep things easy. Ariana.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariana. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area in a small town called Moraga, if you know it. Go St. Mary's Gals. I have three kids, two dogs, and a husband, and I am the founder and CEO of Shoshana's Daughter. It's a coaching organization dedicated to supporting parents as they transition back to work after parental leave. And I also help innovative companies that want to enhance their parental leave offerings. So that means we work one-on-one with parents, ideally while they're still on leave, but getting ready to come back, and then help them through that transitional period for about a month or two until they really feel like they got their sea legs. And then also on the company side, offering consulting and training on best practices in supporting their parent employees for those companies.
Amazing. Thank you. All right, Steph.
Huge fan of everyone here, especially Ariana and what the work that she's doing with Shoshana's Daughter. But hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Foley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of UZ Care. We are a wellness tech company. We know that parents in America are struggling and babies don't come with a manual. So UZ is bringing over a $40 billion postpartum care market from Asia to the US, offering parents a guided start with tech-enabled care, education, and resources from the first year and beyond. And we're hyper-focused on postnatal retreats right now. And so essentially 24 hours, you get kicked out of hospital, you can come over to us, and we're partnering with a bunch of employer benefits, as well as getting insurance coverage is kind of top of mind for us. And especially with the US rolling out doula care for 50% of the states, I think, right now, in terms of coverage, we see that postpartum care is an industry that will continue to grow. So look forward to the conversation.
I could have used some of those retreats myself. All right,
Me
Megan.
too.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Barbier. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for Boomi. We're a global integration platform SaaS company. And in addition to leading all of the great people functions, I am obsessed with creating an amazing employee experience. And so the topic today is very relevant and very much a part of how we think about the employee experience at Boomi. And I need to just, shameless plug, I am so honored to be in the presence of really amazing women who are looking at creative approaches and maybe non-conventional solutions to addressing this aspect of our workforce that is so often underrepresented or underserved. So really, really grateful for the opportunity to have a conversation with everyone here today.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And thank you for being here. This is an honor to be with all three of you. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions of all three of you first. So talk to us a little bit about, just from your perspective and the work you're doing, what are some of the challenges that you see out there today when parents welcome a baby into their home and attempt to return to work? So maybe we can just go in the same order to keep things simple.
Sure. Yeah, really important question. But first, I like to think of this from a macro perspective, that the culture concerning parental leave in the United States is really messy. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national paid leave policy to support families welcoming a child. So that kind of sets the stage. And then I think that trickles down to organizations, big and small. But to look at the parents, the challenges that they're facing, I mean, for anyone who's a parent, you know that your identity shifts, your priorities, your day-to-day life. If you have a partner, your relationship with that individual. And then you have the external pressure. Social media doesn't help. You have family and friends chiming in on what you should and shouldn't do. And you're doing all of this with lack of sleep. Your hormones are going bonkers. Your self-care routine is out the window. You're trying to figure out how to delegate, let go of control. You love this human being you just welcomed into the world. And then you have to go back to work. And it's like, oh my gosh, anxiety, fear, panic, imposter syndrome of, how can I do it all and do it all well? And companies are, generally speaking, disorganized at best. And most managers are usually clueless on how to not only handle an employee that says, I'm expecting, or my partner is expecting, to now they're back at work, and how do you transition and reboard them? And so there's no practical support systems in most cases for new parents. And there needs to be procedural infrastructure to help parents into this transition. And there just isn't any. In fact, 25% of all parents returning to work, their colleagues are surprised to see them. They're like, oh, you're back. I didn't even know today was your first day back. Welcome back. But while they've been out, there's been changes in the organization, maybe leadership changes, maybe there's new team dynamics, new people have been hired, new projects, and potential resentment. Because if some of the colleagues on the team were left holding the bag while they were out, they're going to kind of carry that with them, unfortunately. And so that's why nearly 3/4 of parents say that they have difficulty when they come back balancing their personal life and their work priorities.
Thank you.
Lots there.
Yeah, so much to unpack there, but I feel like Ariana did such a great job of summarizing at the macro level and like how where it should start, right? And to kind of how it impacts you on a everyday basis. And I think that the things that I see in my sector is specifically after you have a kid, what I'm seeing is I think moms or parents, they don't even realize that they need self-care. So Yuzi's tagline is self-care is baby care, right? And I think once you become a parent, a lot of people are like, hey, put your own oxygen on first. And I think a lot of moms are really, really guilty of it. We don't take care of ourselves, right? And so I'll just add to what Ariana said, but an additional point is just starting the dialogue of how can you take care of yourself, and if your company, and how should you advocate for that type of support too, right? Because just because you get an X amount of parental leave doesn't mean that like you're fully supported. Is there a transition plan back to work? Are you actually getting taken care of? Like, I mean, are you like, we're trying to get into companies where, hey, like maybe you give them postnatal, like a postnatal support, postpartum care through a doula support or a postpartum retreat, right? Very similar offering. But you know, that you're basically just expected to go and like bounce back. And that's just not the reality, unfortunately. So yeah.
Thanks, Steph.
I love the word and the language Ariane used with messy. I think this is a really interesting challenge, and I do think it's different in different regions, and the US is sadly lagging behind, I think, a lot of the, the other regions in the world. And we have these two worlds that seemingly don't coexist well together, and that is the world of work, especially if you are in tech or a very intense and aggressive timeline, aggressive growth type of environment. And by the way, now you have a complete paradigm shift in your family dynamic, in your physical and mental well-being. And I think when we talk about the on-ramping or the re-ramping of parents and birth parents to work, there's so often this missed opportunity that I see on the employer side. Whether you like it or not, an alignment is happening. And all these things that were held in balance, and you kind of feel like you have everything going, get thrown out the window when you introduce a new family member, or when you're struggling with other aspects of balancing growing your family or changes within your family. Add to that messiness, and I think many of our generation may see this, is that it's never compartmentalized. So very frequently, you're not just dealing with a newborn, you're dealing with physical challenges. You might be dealing with an ailing parent, or you're a caregiver to other children or children with special needs. There's a whole list of things. So I think one of the great opportunities we have is to start looking at what we can do as leaders, as employers, as coworkers, and as a society to say, how do we help make this time as positive as possible and take some of those really negative aspects, the anxiety, the fear, the confusion, the exhaustion, how do we take that out and start figuring out ways that we can contribute positively to individuals that are going through this experience, because it's such a significant part of our workforce, of our talent pool that we're targeting, that it's a miss if we don't engage on that front. So I always look at it from the employer side or from the leader side. How am I part of this solution? This is a problem. How am I part of the solution? And if I do nothing, or if I think, well, I'm not a mom, I'm past my childbearing years, I've already done this, it's not my problem, I think that's a mistake. I think that's the wrong way to approach it.
Thank you. Yeah, those are all just really good context for the conversation today. And so to get a little bit more personal, I'm curious, you know, why each of you personally are really passionate about helping women re-enter the workforce after having children. We already talked a little bit about, you know, why this is an important topic, but if there's anything additionally for you to add, you know, on a more personal note, would love to hear that. And let's start with Megan this time, and then we can go to Steph and Ariana.
I'm a mom of two boys. I don't think I mentioned that when we started, and you know, have certainly seen an evolution in just the conversations that we have in the professional environment around moms and parents and new parents returning to work. I care about this for a couple reasons. One, when I went through this, I felt really lost and really alone. And I had the benefit of working with a really great company that had good benefits, that had high empathy. And I still really, really struggled on what this meant for me as a professional. How am I going to be a good HR practitioner? How am I going to be a good mom? And no one was there to help me answer those questions, or I felt like no one was there. I will never forget that feeling. And I really look at an opportunity for me to say, how can I help so that I don't have a colleague that goes through what I went through? And so I do approach it from that way as well. And again, I think that there is such a wonderful way that we are evolving as a society and as a professional workforce that we get to have these conversations now. Wow, let's be really good at this, because I am hungry to learn more. I am hungry to be better at this, and I want to inspire that in others. So that's where I come to the table on where my passion on this topic comes from.
We need more HR leaders like you, Megan. Thank you. Steph?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many reasons why I care, but I think the catalyst for me was, my career's mostly been in a male-dominated environment. So I was in the military, as a army officer, and then went into tech, right? So constantly surrounded by the opposite gender, and I think for me, it was just realizing that we have to open the dialogue and having the conversation and educating my peers on like all the issues that comes with this new transition of life. And the reason why I started UZ was from my own lived experience of really surviving postpartum depression, and I didn't even know about it. And I think the realization when I started to get diagnosis and treatment was 2 years after I had my kid. So I'd already been back at work for, a year and a half, right? And just kind of chugging along and just reaching really just burnout and realizing I wasn't the best version of myself as a partner at home, a mother, and even a product leader. I wasn't great for my team either. And so, taking a step back, that's why I wanted to take on this problem of supporting moms and families in the fourth trimester, because I think you have to start strong, right? You have to have the education and the awareness of and just the recovery aspect of it, and to be able to start this new transition in a really meaningful way. Yeah, so that's my story.
Thank you. Ariana?
Right. Yeah, similar to Steph, the reason why I started Shoshana's Daughter was just from my own lived experience and transitioning back to work 3 times, but then hearing from all of my new mommy friends and all the baby groups that I joined, they were having the same anxiety, the same struggles personally and professionally. And, I thought to myself, okay, if I want to get in shape, I go to the gym and I hire a trainer. If I want help in my birthing process, I hire a doula. Why isn't there someone out there that I can call? And I've used executive and business coaches at various stages of my life. And I was like, why isn't there a solution out there to help me during this small but pivotal time in my life? I really need someone in my corner helping me think outside of the box. And I don't want to go to my family and my friends or my HR director about this. I want someone who's neutral, who knows how to do this. And so that's why I started Shoshana's Daughter. I had, going personal, Steph shared something personal. The week that I was finishing up my work with one of my children when I was pregnant, my manager asked me to go work at a 3-day conference at a booth. So that would have meant me being 9 months pregnant on my feet at an HR conference, no less. And this guy like clearly had no idea. So I turned him down. He was like, but your leave doesn't start till like Friday at 5 p.m. Why can't you go? I was like, you know what? If you want to bring it up with HR, you can. And I had my kid on Sunday. So it's like a good thing I said no. He is also the same manager that announced my pregnancy in a meeting without me there to my colleagues. And I start getting all these Slack messages of like, oh, congratulations. So there's just got to be a better way for women to have these experiences in work and just for themselves as well.
My goodness, I'm sure the stories are endless with examples, just as we've talked about with a few here on the call today. But it's just so unfortunate that women have to go through a lot of this. So let's dive in a little bit. And for those of you in the audience, feel free to put questions in the chat as we dive in here. So Ariana, we're going to start with you. So you work with both moms and dads on an individual basis, but then also with organizations on the reboarding process, coming back, after a leave. You're also training managers on how to support parents coming back from leaves. Tell us a little bit about why this is important. I think we've talked about some of those things already, but if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, so on the individual side, I think we touched on that. People do want to show up as the best version of themselves for their family, for themselves, for their employer, and they want to be present and joyful. And everyone wins when that happens. And I think on the business side, there are business consequences if this is not handled correctly. Using myself as an example, my entire maternity leave, I was just like steaming with anger for how my last interaction went with my manager asking me to work that conference. And I wanted to leave and was planning on leaving. And then I heard that he was going to be moving on. So I came back. But managers have such an influence over the employee experience. And if they're not properly trained on empathy and they don't have a process to follow and they're not properly delegating workload and transitioning that workload at the right time, and there's really no plan in place, everyone is set up to fail. You wouldn't just say, oh, guess what, everybody, today's open enrollment. Let's go. You have to plan for it. There's so much work and preparation that goes into that. Why is this any different? And then it trickles down in the culture as well. For instance, some of my clients have reported we set up these like mother rooms, mother pods, but people are using them to take their Zoom calls. So a mom needs to go in there to express milk. And there's a guy in there on a Zoom call and says, maybe you should just go to the bathroom. Like this is happening. So even though companies are well intentioned and will set up the infrastructure, if you will, for supporting a mother, if it's not respected and the culture isn't there, and I don't know that like the CHRO even knew that was happening, right? But if they did, then I'm sure something would happen. So sometimes it's really helpful to have like a survey or an external party come in and kind of do an evaluation on what's really going on so that you can get some answers.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Hearing those kind of stories is just, cringeworthy. So, obviously the work you do with organizations is critical and so important. And it's amazing when leadership, puts the funds behind it to be able to hire someone like yourself, a consultant, to bring in and really make some changes for the better. But for those out there that, maybe they work for an organization that doesn't have the funds to hire a consultant such as yourself, what are some of the things that they can be doing without money to support parents coming back from a leave?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is I do offer a free 1-hour consultation. We actually get a lot done in those 1-hour consultations. But above and beyond that, I would definitely suggest starting with an anonymous survey for your parent employees to get some real honest feedback, to almost kind of set like, what should our roadmap look like? Where are we deficient in some of our processes? You can encourage parent ERGs for people to come together. A lot of times when people feel like they're not the only ones, they don't want to be a squeaky wheel. Also taking personalities into account. If you have an introvert, they're not going to want to knock on someone's door, go face to face and say, hey, I have a problem. Writing an email might be a little bit easier, but there is power in numbers. So I think that empowering your people to have a voice and to encourage and ask for that feedback will create some psychological safety and really, really help. And then we're not going to go down into the weeds on this, but you really do need to have a plan. From the moment that an employee says, I'm expecting, and that is a very scary and vulnerable moment for a mom or a dad, because everyone has heard horror stories of what has happened when they have announced that they're expecting. And so there needs to be a plan in place from that moment. How does that manager react and respond? Everybody should be reacting and responding positively and in the same way. And they're going to feel so relieved. And they're going to be able to show up and do their best work every day until their leave. And they're going to be excited to come back to work. They will be. They're going to look forward to it because there's going to be a plan in place, a meeting cadence. There's going to be performance expectations that may be modified a little bit. Really coming up with a collaborative plan that you work on with the employee for what feels good for everybody.
And even like you mentioned earlier with like letting the team know they're coming back on that day and to be able to welcome them back and have that plan for their workload and how it's going to be transitioned and all of those things. I know at my last company, we had a Slack channel for parents, and once it was implemented, it's just like a small little thing, but once it was implemented, I know I felt more of that psychological safety because I was like, oh my gosh, there's other parents here. Like, oh my gosh, they're dealing with the same things I am and having to take time off for appointments and childcare and the kid's sick, like all of those things that come up. So I think even just little things like that can be helpful. Thank you. And Steph, I want to pass it over to you. So I'm really excited to learn more about the postpartum retreats that you run. So, you know, you're running these retreats and you're a wellness tech company focused on bringing postpartum retreats within the 30 minutes of every single mother in the delivery room, which is huge. So tell us more about these retreats and what do they entail?
Yeah, I think it goes back to we used to have a village, right? Um, we used to have an uncle, an aunt, a grandma, a cousin that can hold your baby while you just go take a shower, or if you had a question about colic, or if you have something else. Like now we just turn into social media and there's a lot of misinformation there. I think it just creates more anxiety. And so what we created was essentially a third place for the fourth trimester. And then obviously we want to go extend beyond the fourth trimester, but we're hyper focusing in the fourth trimester because it's really important. It's very isolating. Babies just don't come with a manual. It's like basically you get kicked out of the hospital and you're like, oh wow, like now what do I do? I'm responsible for keeping this little human alive and there's no resources for it. Parents are isolated, and they don't have the connection, they don't have the care that they need, and they also don't have the knowledge to be the best parent that they want to be. So what we do is we partner with hospitality groups, so luxury hospitality groups, and we essentially like take their availability and we bring in all that care. So pelvic floor PT, mental health specialist, actually Ariana's like, an offering with us as well. And so basically it's a family-led journey and it's up to the parents on what they want to do. So like the whole family can come, whether you're a family of 3 or 4 or 5, and you get to decide your journey on, what your day looks like. It goes from, checking in and into your special area, and then you have a doula that can check the baby into the nursery, and then you get a foot bath every night, and then you might want to schedule a massage or a high tea, and you get 3 meals that is designed by a nutritionist that allows you to like not think about the things that are just the mundane things that you're expected to bounce back into just reality, right? So the meal's already thought through for you. There's no laundry, there's nothing. You're truly just there to have a mama moon, right? Instead of a baby moon, have a mama moon, and where you can truly take care of yourself and recover. Everywhere else has it. In Asia, there's about 7,000 of these.
Wow.
Right. And 80 to 90% of women go to these for about 30 days. And what do we get here? We get like icicle pad, like, or mesh underwear from the hospital, and that's it. And we're expected to just come back and go to work and be our high performing self. But like Ariana's called out, like you change so much when you become a parent, and it is just so difficult. And I want to normalize the whole self-care concept for parents, and it's so important. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I was, as you were talking, reflecting on my experience after I had my first, and it was the C-section. So I had, an extra, whatever, day or two in the hospital. And I know most people are like rushing to get out of the hospital because it's such a like sterile, like icky
Yeah,
environment, and there's machines beeping and the whole thing. But
totally.
like, I was like terrified to leave the hospital because I was
Yeah.
having trouble breastfeeding, and like,
Yeah.
I actually asked to stay an extra day so I could get more breastfeeding support. And so like, to have somewhere like this to go that's like
Yeah.
a really peaceful, amazing environment with all the support you need would be just like invaluable.
Totally, totally. And I remember like, going to lactation specialist. So we have a lactation specialist, mental health specialist, everything on site, right? Like, and we get all that information before with the customer app. So they give us all the information and the demands of what their itinerary looks like, right? But I just personally remember struggling so much during my postpartum period. It's like all my friends were still working and I had no one to hang out with.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then I remember driving to my lactation consultant, couldn't find parking. My baby's crying because you can't feed them because they're hungry. You're supposed to go in full, right? And I'm uncomfortable, couldn't find parking. Just like he's crying, I'm crying. It's like it's messy. It's so messy. And I think on this call, a lot of women will get this, like, we're high performing women. We are type A, we're organized, we like control, right? But babies and kids are the antithesis of control.
Yeah.
So we try to bring a little bit of control and a little bit of calm to the experience.
Oh my goodness. So
Yeah.
lovely. So tell us a little bit about like the women or parents that are coming to your retreats. Like, what are you hearing from them right now about either their challenge or what's going on with them?
Yeah, I think in general, there's just a lot of, I think there's a lot of fear. I think a lot of them don't want to leave after they come. We actually have parents that will come directly from the hospital and then they'll come back at the 1 month mark or the 2 month mark. And I think just wanting to have a little bit of that stability. And I think one thing, I'm based out in Seattle. I'm sure folks have seen this, like, Amazon just announced that like you're going back to work, right? Like 5 days a week. But who is that penalizing? It's penalizing the parents, really. Like, because if you look at the American culture of work, we like school starts at what, like, 7 until 2, maybe, and then you have this piece together aftercare. Maybe it's in the same location, maybe it's not. But how if parents are not taken care of at home, how are they going to expect it to be like focus at work? Like, I mean, it's like, that's a very fundamental thing. Like, I was in the military. As an Army officer, I had 300 people that I was in charge of, right? And the thing that was I knew that as a commander, if I took care of them and their family, they would be able to do the job. And I think corporate America needs a similar, like, servant leadership mindset.
Yeah, you're so right. So talk to us a little bit about why it's important to prioritize self-care during that postpartum period.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I feel like everyone on this call can probably opine on this, but I think, you just don't expect how hard it is. And when I talk to people, I feel like I've done a lot of hard things in my life, but becoming a parent is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, I think. And because it's dynamic, it changes. Every stage is different. You're dealing with different things. I mean, the Surgeon General just wrote an advisory piece about how parents in America are struggling, right? And there's so many dynamics to it, and it's so complicated. And like, my thesis is that if the parents start off strong, they'll have a better foundation, right? So bring, like, important content like Shoshana's Daughter or Gottman Institutes, like bringing baby home, like those are the things that I think companies should, look at to like support. And they can do it at a postnatal retreat, or they can provide individual pieces, right? But I do think that that's a part of the dialogue of, hey, look, parents, like, birthing parent, non-birthing parent, like it's a huge transition. We can't just expect people to bounce back. Yeah.
I have one more question. It's a little bit off
Yeah.
script here. And I think I heard you say this earlier, so I'm curious a little bit more about it. My first thought obviously goes to like the cost of something like this, right? As a parent. But I think I heard you say that some insurances are either covering it or you're working to get insurances to cover it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you're totally going off script, but I love it. I think that is our biggest headwind, right?
Yeah.
I like, I'm an immigrant. I grew up with a single mother. Like, our price point is not something that my mother would have been able to like take advantage of, right? Although it is, if you look at the price point, we're about $1,000 a night, and you piece together all the care, like we have RNs, we have nurses on staff, and we have to pay them a livable wage too.
Yeah,
And if
absolutely.
you aggregate everything together, if a customer were to piece all the components that we have together, including the hotel, the 3, room service meals, everything else, we are about, 70% cheaper, right?
Wow.
But it's $1,000 a night, right? So not everybody is gonna be able to set aside that money. But I would challenge folks to be like, hey, this is an investment in yourself. Like
Yeah.
one night in the hospital to give birth, I think, if you have a vaginal birth, is 30,000, and you get really like crappy food too. But I do think that in order to democratize this, it has to be covered by insurance. It has to, we have to have companies, and like amazing CHROs like Megan to be like, hey, we need this for our like companies. And I see this on a similar trend, like, 10 years ago, fertility wasn't covered, IVF wasn't covered, and that was expensive, right? Like it's a one-time thing, it's expensive, it's family forming. But I like now companies like Care Fertility, Maven, Kindbody, Progeny, and it's part of a norm. Like it's almost like most tech companies have that. And so I see the same trend for postpartum care, because it actually has more kind of addressable market, because it's everyone. There's
Right.
3.7 million births in America every year, right? And if we can have insurance cover some of it, and I actually think the perfect model should be a tri model, where insurance covers for a third, the employer covers for a third, and then the employee covers for a third, right? So then that employee has a little bit of like teeth in the game too.
Yeah.
And so, but you can't just take from the whole, like you can't take it from the business, otherwise the business won't exist, right? So yeah.
Well, thank you for being a trailblazer along with Ariana, because this is, as we're talking about, so important. We're going to shift over to Megan now and talk a little bit through like the organizational standpoint. So let's say, as a people leader and employer, what are you seeing that's trending with regards to employers offering what they're offering to parents in terms of perks and benefits?
Yeah, I'm happy to say, when I look across the landscape, I'm encouraged. I think we're accelerating and we're evolving even from a decade ago in terms of what we offer, how we think about this as an employer or as a collective society. And, again, I think I heard some really, really strong points from Ariana and stuff that I will echo. There's this level of flexibility that I think is getting woven through everything when it comes to benefits, when it comes to employee experience. And so in some ways, this is a really nice motion that complements what we can achieve as an employer or as a benefits provider to those individuals that are returning from leave after becoming a parent or adding to their families. So flexibility is chief among them. And some of the challenges around that are scalability, right? So I have an organization of over 2,000 people, and I could have a fraction of them go out on some kind of parental leave, and every single one will be different. How do I scale and serve that? And I think that's something, and I'll circle back on that in a minute, just to encourage everyone here. There's a lot of solutions, and not having a budget and not having money is not an excuse. There's so many things that you can do. I think the other piece too is education. I've heard that, directly expressed from Ariana and stuff, and also kind of indirectly, but no one is an expert at this. I've only had 2 kids. That does not make me an expert. And it was a long time ago. It's probably different. And I've, forgotten most of what I learned at that point anyway. And so I think when we look at what kind of trends are we seeing, or what kind of things do we want to maybe capture and get ahead of the curve as an employer, is how do we look at educating not just the impacted individuals, but the leaders, the managers, the stakeholders, the colleagues, the benefits team, the HR practitioners. How do we educate people on what this means and what your role can be in contributing to a positive experience when someone is coming back and they're coming up on the ramp to return from leave? We think about even just the simple point of payment, right? If you are taking leave, maybe it's paid, maybe it's not. If it is paid, there's usually at least 3 different parties that are taking like the multiple payers to make sure that you get a paycheck while you're out. That is overwhelming and daunting when you stack that onto everything else. So as an employer, I know for me personally, we are always looking at how do we simplify this? How do we leverage services or resources that are one point of contact that provide for a cohesive end-to-end experience? And going back to what Ariana was saying, where it's not just you wake up one day and guess what, someone's out on leave and then they're coming back. You're thinking about the plan. You're thinking about being prepared to have a conversation the moment somebody tells you that they are expecting or that they're planning on taking parental leave. And I think that there are elements there that, again, the resources, the access to data is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And as an employer, how do we start pulling that together so people feel educated and that we can encourage our leaders, our HR teams, our parents or soon to be parents to think about the experience holistically. Where before it would be, here's your FMLA, we changed in the system, let us know when you're back, great, here you're now you're active. That is no longer going to cut it. You miss so much, and I think there's so many opportunities you lose. If you can actually work with your individuals that are experiencing this, and bonus points, meet them where they're at. So maybe you have a mom who is intentionally going the single parent route. That's more and more common now. That was unheard of in a generation ago. How do you craft an experience that is going to meet her where she is at? Maybe you have somebody that is dealing with a troubled pregnancy or has a child with special needs that comes as a surprise that they were not expecting. How do you help them feel supported as they navigate that? If you are able to do that as an employer, again, this is not earth-shattering news. You're going to have evangelists. You're going to have people that are connected and passionate and are going to want to show up for you. You're going to be a contributor of that. And even if it's you as a leader or you as their manager, it doesn't even have to be the whole company. You can still have that positive impact. So I think these are some things that I'm seeing we're only going to accelerate down this direction. And then I think the other piece too, when we talk about simplifying, I think that's another challenge. And I also see a lot of responses to the system around how do you get creative? And again, we have great examples here with Ariana and Steph and what they're bringing to the table. But how do we make sure that individuals that are engaging in this aren't so overwhelmed by the process itself? So there's a ton of information out there. There's a ton of services that provide this. If you are an employer or if you are a decision maker, even if you do not have the budget, you can leverage your workforce to help impact this. ERGs are an amazing resource. We cannot underestimate the power and the lift that we can get from deploying our own workforce around getting excited about this. Providing a mentor to somebody through the ERG, that doesn't cost anything, right? Maybe send them some flowers and give them some acknowledgement, but it's not this massive budget break. So I always really challenge leaders and organizations when they're thinking about what their offering is to parents that are on-ramping. Budget or lack thereof cannot be an excuse. There are things we can do collectively to make sure that we're doing what we can to have a positive impact. And again, you're building that connection. You're building people that are evangelists for you when you can do that.
Oops, I was muted. You mentioned the flexibility that a lot of companies are now offering in terms of benefits. We did a fireside chat back in April, and it was about total compensation. And the CEO from a company called WorkLife was with us. And he said a lot of companies, and this is the solution he offers, but a lot of companies are moving in the direction where, like, let's say they offer like a learning and development stipend or a like fitness, you can like get your gym membership, covered. Like that's not gonna serve everybody. Not everybody wants to invest in those things. And so rather than, making it like for a very specific purpose, still offering that amount of money, but people can have the flexibility to choose what they want that to go to. And so I think that could be a really great example of how companies, maybe they already have some kind of reimbursement program or stipend, and people can, choose however they want to invest that money. And this could be a great way to do that.
rise of lifestyle spending accounts, right? This is a great foray
Yes.
into what could be. And I know you jogged my memory on this too. Ariana and I had talked about thinking about creative solutions. How do you maybe think about coaching through an L&D budget versus a benefit budget if that's going to, impede you? Rethink this, right? I mean, I feel like there's this really nice inflection point that we're at to blow the doors off how we've thought about maternity, parental leave, whatever that is. Even changing the language around it can really have an impact. And so I'm overall excited by the trends that I'm seeing. I don't think it changes the impact or the weight of the challenges that are there. I certainly think that being able to even have a dialogue like this is something that in years past wasn't necessarily fruitful or possible. So I'm loving the progress.
Well, and we talked about on our prep call, and I can't remember now because it was probably a month ago, but other countries are now starting even to support like menopause benefits. And I think that kind of goes along with this whole discussion because it's something that women are going to go through in their lives, right? And how can we support more of just those natural phases of life that that women go through? And so we are kind of coming up on the end, but I have one last question, and this is for you all. So feel free to chime in as you like. So if we have any employees out there or anyone that maybe, advises or coaches employees, how, as an employee, can you empower yourself to ask for what you want and need? And then how can the employee, ask for different benefits or just advocate? Anyone can chime in.
I'll go. I think I touched on this before, but based on personality type, some people may not want to advocate for themselves. They're going to be, the quiet mouse in the corner, or they'll do the quiet quitting and they'll start looking for another job and then just leave. And they're never going to speak up for it. So I don't know that the onus should be placed on the employee for this. I really do believe that the employer should be taking responsibility for finding out what's important. And that's why I think surveys and ERGs are so important, is because you do have this population amongst your midst, and tap into them, tell them it's safe, it's okay. You can anonymize the surveys that you do, but ask what's important to them, and you will quickly and passionately find out what these parents are struggling with. And there are going to be a variety of ways to potentially solve those issues that are coming up, and many of them don't cost anything. It's just, further education, it's having conversations, it's changing a few policies here and there, but it's, if you have a bunch of well-intentioned leaders kind of step up to the plate and lead by example and say, this is a safe place, we want you here, and we want you to be all in and not be distracted with the things that are going on at home. And we know that that's going to be taken care of because we have the flexibility, and that mother's room is always going to be available for you. It's not going to be taken up by someone who doesn't need it. That's really going to change the culture and the employee experience.
Thank you.
Add, if you're not fortunate enough to work for an organization with a really prospective and engaging HR group, advocacy is a route, and sometimes it is feeling a path where you're comfortable raising your voice. I mentioned ERGs. If you have a group, whether it's a women's group or a new parents group, there is strength in numbers. There are forums. Maybe you're not comfortable speaking or requesting, but there might be others that could do so on your behalf or behalf of the employee group. So I would definitely, if you feel overwhelmed but passionate about the advocacy point, leveraging others there as well. I also think the other great thing in the age we live in is data. There is a ton of information. And so coming at it from a nuts and bolts perspective, right? Yes, I have a lot of emotion and passion around this. I also have numbers. There are, even if you go to, Carrot is a great one. They have a website where they literally give you templates to advocate for fertility benefits, doula support, menopause treatment. And so don't feel that you have to reinvent the wheel or go do, launch your own research with a fellowship grant. There's information there that you can find to leverage the case. My parting words on this particular topic: if you ask, please do so unapologetically. I believe that if we look at this as something that benefits everybody, this is not something to be sorry for, hat in hand, may I please. It is, hey, this is actually really important. And let me talk about the positive impact it can have. And let me show you why this is an investment, not an expense. I think that ends up bringing so much more power to the ask versus, I hate to trouble you, knock on your door. Don't be mousy about it. Be unapologetic. Please ask.
Mhm.
I love that. I think that's so important because I think as an employer now, right? I'm also like, my headspace a lot of time is on like, where's our bottom line? Like, how are we growing and things like that. And you might be surprised. Some employers might be like, "Hey, I want you to ask, right? Like I want to understand like what your feedback is and like maybe like an LSA lifestyle savings account is the right approach for a certain company or maybe like specific curated vendor is the right route." But I think I think from an employee perspective, I also think it's important that you tell the receiving company. So for example, if you want a postpartum retreat or postpartum care, right? If you want to come to UZ, then you should tell me too. You should tell the company, I want my company to have a UZ benefit. And so then I can have that data point to go back to your companies and be like, hey, your employees actually want this benefit. So it's like more fuel to the fire. And like, that's how we can collaborate to really ingress and start the dialogue on change. Because otherwise it'll never change, right? Because I mean, unfortunately, if we look at the CEOs of Fortune 500, they don't look like us in this room right now. And so they might not be thinking about it.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you. Thank you all. This was just such a engaging and thoughtful conversation. I think a lot of really great ideas out there and really amazing to see so many great resources that are starting to pop up. And thank you again for paving the way for women and men who are starting families and needing that support. As we wrap up, it looks like there's no questions, but if anyone wants to hop off their mic and raise their hand for a quick question, we have a little bit of time. But just wanted to give another huge thank you to Ariana, Steph, and Megan. You're really an inspiration for what you're doing. And so, yeah, just everyone else on the call wanted to thank you for being here. I know Fridays can be tough sometimes. This is a great conversation to have on a Friday. Keep an eye on Talent Collective's social pages. We have tons of other opportunities and workshops and webinars just like this. And yeah, hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kristen.
Bye, ladies.